Hi, everyone. Good, whatever part of the day it is, because we're folks from all over the place in here today. We are very excited to have Taylor and Monica here from Firefly Partners, and they're going to talk with us about SEO best practices for nonprofits.
All right. Thanks, Dee. Hello, everyone. Monica and I are both joining you from East Coast time, so it's not too early now for us. It's good to be here. We're excited to be part of this conference today and give you a little bit of information to walk away with on like SEO. What does it mean? How can you get started with it? How can you improve on your own SEO? And kick it off. Please keep this interactive. Type into the chat. Monica and I will both be talking about some of our thoughts around SEO and how to get the most out of the time that you spend on your SEO, but please keep this interactive, and Dee will interrupt us if there's like a really great question that comes up. We will be happy to chime in. All right, so I'm going to get started with some introductions on who we are and what we're about. My name is Taylor Shanklin. I am the Vice President of Growth at Firefly Partners, and I've been in the nonprofit sector for 13, almost 14 years now, which makes me feel a little bit old. But I started my career in this industry in nonprofit technology and have worked at some of the large technology platforms over time and done kind of everything under the sun, from digital strategy to building websites to helping organizations with their branding. And so I kind of like to do a mix of, what you consider online marketing. And I am one of the co-hosts of our Firefly podcast, the nonprofit Razzle Dazzle. It's a new podcast where we are shining a light on stories of people like you who are actually doing the work every day on the ground. So go check that out. You can find it on our website at fireflypartners.com. I'm going to hand it over to Monica to intro yourself.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. Excited to be here. As Taylor mentioned, on the East Coast as well, so almost lunchtime here for us. I have been in the nonprofit industry for a little over 10 years now, both sides of the fence, working in nonprofits themselves, as well as now, on the other side, helping multiple different nonprofits with their digital and marketing work. I am a senior digital strategist here at Firefly, so I help all of our nonprofit clients come up with digital strategy solutions for their marketing and digital channels. And then, it says here, I'm a metrics and measurements nerd. So that's why SEO to me is really exciting. As a strategist, I like being able to kind of, come up with some ideas, put them and implement them, and then be able to track them in real time, whether you're seeing success or not and what tweaks might need to be made. So excited to talk with you all.
Awesome. Yeah. I know just enough to be dangerous. Monica knows enough to actually get results. So I'm excited with what she'll share and talk about some examples of things that she's done when she kind of gets in and nerds out and actually puts SEO best practices into place. But to kick us off, I wanted to talk a little bit about why SEO matters, why we're here, why digital matters. I know we're all living in this digital world these days where it feels like we're living our lives behind a computer screen or a phone tablet or an iPhone screen. And we live in this like hyper connected world, right? But we're still, not meeting in person, and we're having to really rethink our digital strategy, right? Like, how do we show up online? How do people find us? How do we connect with people online? And I know that it can be a challenge. And so hopefully some of what we'll share today with you will give you some ideas and some, what we think are like actually simple things for you to go do at your organization to get found better, right? Because the problem is a lot of digital experience actually feel very disconnected. And maybe even in the context of SEO, when people are searching for a term that should bring up your organization's website, it's not. And so what we do here at Firefly Partners is really think about how do we take all that we know and best practices of different digital systems, because there's a lot, right? Like there's a lot to know. There's SEO, there's your website, there's your online fundraising tool, there's your advocacy, there's a lot of different things. And so we really like to look at a holistic perspective of how all of that stuff works together. So like I said, there's a lot, you're juggling a lot. So hopefully today we'll break it down for you in a way that feels more human, right? And so we really believe in using digital strategies and techniques and SEO best practices and communication best practices to create more human to human digital connection points, right? So that it doesn't feel like you're just behind a computer screen, but you're actually connecting with the people who care about your cause. That's a little bit about why we're here. I'm curious to hear from the crowd. Let's get this interactive early, people. Go ahead and tell us, like, when you think SEO, what does that mean to you? Like, what comes to mind? Maybe some words, type it into the chat if you wouldn't mind. But like, SEO can feel like this big blue ocean of who knows what, right? It can be a little bit overwhelming. So I'm curious to hear what you think of when you say the word SEO, hear the word SEO. Yoast, okay, I'm gonna read some of the stuff I'm seeing coming up in the chat. Get to the top of Google, Yoast, blog posts and links to our site, good stuff. AdWords, I think of CEO, that's interesting, Gail. What the CEO wants you to focus on, maybe. Constantly changing algorithms, complicated. Yeah, another Taylor, I agree, it can feel complicated. Definitely being findable, right? Ways for the correct people to connect to the correct information. I love that. All right, Jake said buzzwords that boost your content's findability. Okay, so I think we've all got kind of like a competition. Oh, that's interesting. All right, someone said competition. Thanks, Ben. So I think that's really interesting. And, you know, there is a lot that comes to mind when you think about SEO. So what we're hoping to do for you today is to like break that down, right? We're going to get into SEO 101, like what exactly is it? I've got a definition to share with you. We'll look at what Wikipedia says, and then Monica's going to really get, like, nerd out and get into the weeds of like, how do you implement this, especially for, you know, those folks that are feeling like this is complicated, right? Like, how do we break that down if you're not technical? How do we break that down if you're trying to sell maybe to your CEO or your ED that you need to invest some time and energy in SEO? And then lastly, like, what do you really need to measure? What actually matters? We like to really focus on measuring what matters here at Firefly. So we're going to hopefully give you some tips about that to break down the overwhelm so you don't feel like this dude here, because that's not a fun place to be in, right? We know that. And so I'll just give you like a 10,000 foot view of things to know when you're thinking about SEO, like what goes into it. There's organic search, right? Like things to measure, like measuring how many people are actually finding your site through organic methods. So that's not paid advertising. It's just they're finding your site on their own without some sort of a payment being put behind that. Search words, search keywords are really important, and Monica will get into that more, right? Like, are you actually ranking first for keywords that are related to your cause and your nonprofit? And then lastly, we want to understand our conversion, right? Like, are we actually bringing the right people to our site and converting them? So I think someone mentioned into the chat something about, you know, getting the right people to find your content, and that's exactly it. It's converting. It's pushing the right traffic and then converting that traffic. So SEO 101, get into some definitions. I always like to kind of start a big blue ocean topic like this with like, what does it actually mean? What does Google say? You know, like, what does Google say SEO is? It stands for search engine optimization, and it's really the best friend of search engines like Google, like Bing. There's a lot of different search engines, and that can be something that makes it feel complicated, right? Wikipedia says search engine optimization is the process of growing the quality and quantity of website traffic by increasing the visibility of a website or a web page to users of a web search engine. SEO refers to the improvement of unpaid results and excludes direct traffic and the purchase of paid placement. That's a technical definition. That's a little bit long. It's a little bit wordy. I really like to think about this, especially if you're trying to sell internally and get buy-in internally at your organization, like why this matters so much. And again, why it matters in this really hyper-connected digital world that we live in. I think of it as the discipline of making sure you get found online because your content aligns with what people are searching for. When they open up their browser, they start typing a thing and looking for a topic, right? So it's really about aligning your website with what people are searching for. So when they find you, there's an appropriate match, right? And that leads to higher conversion. All right, it's really important not to neglect your SEO, and we're going to get into a little bit more about why and how it's actually can be less overwhelming than you might think it is. And it doesn't take a mathematician, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. There's some simple things that you can do to start improving that SEO. And that's where I'm going to hand it over to Monica, and she's going to start getting into the why and the how and the what.
Perfect. Thank you, Taylor. So, as the slide says, why does my SEO matter? So, a lot of you all put some good thoughts in the chat here about, why SEO is important to you, what you think of when you think of SEO, and that pretty much answers that question. Why does it matter? There are people there, I think it's like 40,000 searches happen every minute or second within Google. And so people are searching constantly. It equals out to like 3 billion searches a day. And so you want to be able to organically appear in those relevant searches. And, as it said in the previous slide in the definition, a lot of SEO can be done without you having to spend any money up front. It can all be done organically by just making some small tweaks and changes on your website. So it's the second bullet here. It allows your content to work for you. If you produce a keyword-rich site that has a lot of relevant content that your visitors are looking for, it will organically work for you while you sit back, while you sleep, at all hours of the day when these searches are happening. So, it's worth taking the time and investment into your website and the content you're putting out there so that it successfully works for you, all hours of the day. And then you may also find some constituents you didn't even know you were looking for. If you're appearing on searches that, everyone has in their mind, what their ideal constituent or their house file looks like, maybe the age and demographics of this person, but there might be some people out there who are searching for what you're putting out in the world that you're not even aware of. So this helps you get in front of those people and kind of bringing your information and content in front of them as well. Next slide, Taylor. So before we dive into the thick of it, I want to kind of cover some key terms with you all so you understand what we're talking about when we talk about SEO. So the first one is your site health or your site audit score. So every site is given a numerical value, 0 to 100, obviously 100 being best, that indicates how search engines view the quality of your site. When we typically take in new clients and process their site audit for the first time, a lot of people come in around that like 50 to 60 range. So don't freak out if that's where you come in. It's good that there's room for improvement. A lot of these things are easy, to go in there and make tweaks to help you rank higher. And I think it's only like the top 10% of websites actually rank in that 90 to 100 range. So, something to strive for, but definitely don't freak out. The second one is site audit warning. So when you run this site audit and you get your site health score, it will kind of spit out a list of warnings and errors and things that you should fix to help your site have better quality and rank higher in these search engines. So when we think about site audit warnings, these are those minor marks against your website. Some of them you can fix and some of them you can't. So these are things like making sure all of your images have alt attributes, appended to them, that you don't have duplicate H1 tags on a page, because that's how Google reads your pages, is by actually verifying the H1 should be the title of your page, and then you shouldn't use it again on your site content at all. Missing meta descriptions, making sure that each page you put out there has a keyword content rich meta description applied to it. And that's where I saw someone put Yoast in the chat. Yoast is a great plugin to use on your WordPress sites that kind of allows you to be able to put in those meta descriptions, keywords, and it will give you like a red to green smiley face on how it's actually ranking for you. Now moving on to the errors of the site audit. So these are those major marks against your website, and you should make efforts to remedy as many of the errors as possible. So these are 400 status pages. If a link is broken, you have a 404 page or a 403 page. Pages that have duplicate meta descriptions. So again, this is where sometimes a plugin like Yoast can have a downfall. You'll put in your typical, standard meta description, and it just applies it as a blanket to all of your pages, and that actually dings against you really poorly. It's better to not have anything there at all than to have the same thing on every page. And then as well as, non-secure pages. So make sure if you're linking across multiple pages of your site, perhaps to a donation page, back to a blog, that all of your site across the board is going to a secure HTTPS page. Search console queries, pretty self-explanatory. This is what your constituents are typing into the Google search bar when they're looking for things. Search position is where you rank in Google. Are you on the first page? Are you in the top 20, the top 50, where your site is actually placing on those searches. And then keywords, I saw a lot of that in the chat as well. These are those influential words which people are searching by. You'll see the example we'll use throughout this presentation is a food bank one. So you can see here, somebody will search for where to find a food bank near me. So making sure that, the keywords food bank near me are in your meta description, they're in your content, just making sure that you're using them appropriately across your site. Next. So now we'll talk a little bit about how to implement it. Now that we know what we're looking for, we know what we're talking about, now how do we actually do it? So the first step is finding the right tool. There are a lot of different tools out there you can use to help you with your SEO. We're going to talk through two specifically in this presentation that we, are easy to use, user-friendly. You don't have to have a lot of technical skill. So next slide, Taylor. The first one is going to be something you probably all already have implemented on your site, Google Analytics. You dropped the code in, it's there. Maybe you've connected it with your search console, maybe you haven't. It's easy to do with a click of a button within Google Analytics. So now how do you use this? We like Google Analytics a lot because it's free. It's easy, you just drop that tracking code into your website and it will track your, all visitors and all metrics automatically for you across your site. You can use Google Analytics to track those basic metrics. So think of, the search queries, your audience demographics, where are they coming from? How are they interacting with your site? And then you can also, we have a Google Analytics checklist. We help a lot of clients make sure that their Google Analytics is running, implemented correctly. Their cross-domain tracking is set up. So definitely, I think Taylor might have a link or screenshot of it here at the end. You can take a look at it. It kind of gives you those quick steps just to make sure you have your Google Analytics set up and that it is working for you and not against you. So in the next slide here, you can kind of see just some examples of, using Google Analytics to see how are your visitors coming to your site? What pages are they viewing? Are they actually converting? These are all things that you're hoping, with SEO improvements, you'll be able to see these metrics trend upwards. You can see in this example, we've kind of overlaid organic traffic against the all users here. And that is particularly the metric within Google Analytics that when you're working on SEO, you'll want to make sure that's the one you're tracking across month over month. Next. So the next slide here is SEMrush. So this is a paid tool, but this is a tool that we at Firefly utilize across all of our SEO audits and clients that we do work with. This is the tool that actually will provide and conduct that site audit that we were talking about. It will give you that health analysis. It will spit out that, number 0 to 100 where your site ranks. It will give you all of those errors and warnings. It will literally hand you links to them. You click on it, you adjust your meta description, and it's fixed, it's done. You also can integrate your Google Analytics and your Search Console in with SEMrush. So within the one tool by itself, you can track your positioning on keywords. You can track where you're ranking against some of your competitors, as well as your site, your site's health. So this is a good tool that we recommend. It kind of encompasses anything and everything SEO that you need. And it will show you if you have any bad backlinks, people who are linking to you. It's very user-friendly for someone who is non-technical and can easily just export a file of your errors and your warnings and maybe hand it to whoever is managing your website to make those changes for you. So
Yeah, and I'll back that up. I mean, this is a tool that's really great for like letting the machines do the work for you. So again, not having to be a total pro at SEO, you can use this, and you can even like research, you know, competitor organizations and things like that, and like what keywords are they using, what should we track for. So this is a really great tool.
Yeah. So on this page, this is kind of like a screenshot of the dashboard within SEMrush. So this first one on the left is the SEO dashboard that you can see where we have linked Firefly's Google Analytics and Search Console directly in there. You know, so it does give you that general Google Analytics information of, you know, sessions and page visits and bounce rate. But then at the bottom here, you can see we've selected, and I'll go into this in just a little bit, you know, very specific keywords that we want to be ranking for, that we, you know, are, maybe it's spending money for it. You know, we saw the competition, our competitors are using it. It's something we do want to use in our AdWords and, you know, do that cost per click for these words. Or maybe it's just something we're trying to really keyword enrich our site. And so we're trying to make sure we're tracking as expected on these keywords. And this will give you almost a real-time view of, you know, where you're positioned. Did you start at 5 and maybe now you're at 3, or maybe you dropped, and, you know, kind of just give you that real-time view of how and where to tweak your site and your content to make sure that it's continuing to work for you. Because I think I saw somewhere in the chat too, like it's always changing. This is something that it's not a set it and forget it type of thing. You need to monitor it constantly and consistently and just continue to make tweaks each month on it. And then the second one is just an example of that site audit. So your site health, you can see Firefly right now, when we pulled this, was ranking at 85%. There are 4 errors and 1,400 warnings. As mentioned, that might sound like a scary number, but not everything you can fix or you can change. It might be something that you're using multiple plugins, and being able to fix some of those warnings would require you to add another paid plugin, or it might just not be beneficial for you. And if those warnings, as you can see, with those warnings, we're still at 85%. So it's not worth our time investment to try to, you know, sit there and nitpick and fix each one of those. So it's kind of, you know, making sure you're taking the time to identify which ones are impacting you negatively the most and where you should spend your time trying to improve things. So now that you know everything you're looking for, you might be asking yourself, you know, what do I measure? How do I tell if the work we're putting in is actually doing things for us? So next slide. So, you know, as mentioned, you always have to measure to know if you are having success. Like I said before, this is not a set it and forget it thing. That site health number will change on a daily basis, or as Google changes their algorithm, it will change and you'll need to adjust the way your content is presented. So I'm going to take a moment here, let you guys maybe drop in the chat. What are some things you wish you could understand better about your SEO? You know, can you hope it can answer questions for you? Is there something that's a complete mystery to you when it comes to it? Let's see. No, give it a minute. All right, lots of mystery out there. So Taylor, if you want to go to the next.
A lot of mystery. Well, hey, if people want to give it a little time to think about it, it is a good question that came in back to SEMrush real quick. And the question is it billed monthly? Is it the kind of tool that could be used for a few months and then discontinued once you seem to be on track?
Absolutely. So I'm not sure. Oh, you see that it's billed monthly. Okay, I was gonna say, I'm not sure if it is billed monthly. Mm-hmm. It looks like it is, and you actually can pay, I think it's less or more depending how many SEMrush calls them projects. So depending how many projects you have in there, so it's probably, you know, more cost prohibitive or, you know, better if you have just the one project in there. But yes, we typically on our clients will kind of set up their project, run the site health audit, see where they're ranking, help them fix things, do a keyword audit and track it for maybe like 3 to 6 months. And if everything seems to be good and there's not any, you know, giant red flags of, wow, your keywords really tanked this month, what happened? Definitely something at that point you can probably get rid of as well. And just keep implementing what you're already using, you know, across the board within your content.
Right. I think they also allow for a pretty decent length free trial if you want to get in there and like try some things out first and pull some reports out. I think I want to say that the trial is a pretty, at least a week to get in and sort of play around with it. So Monica, we've had some good stuff coming into the chat around the question around like what people really want to understand. So I'm just going to read off a few for you. Corinne says, I'm a blogger without a specific niche. Figuring out keywords is a problem.
So that's where I think your Google Analytics, yep, I think your Google Analytics come in helpful there. You know, if you set up a search console, you can see what people are searching for and when they click into your site, as well as if it's set up properly and you have a site search on your site, you can see what people are actually searching for once they land on your blog. As well as, you know, then taking those keywords and just trying to make your site more, you know, enriched with them, putting out specific blogs or content to those pieces and kind of helping you find, you know, that niche that you fit in there.
Yeah, there's a ton of good questions coming.
I see the 24 hours question.
And then, yeah.
I was gonna say, in terms
ahead.
of site health, yes, it is a 20, you can literally go make the change and click the refresh button and your site health should go up in terms of percentage. Keywords will take, you know, a little bit more time because Google only crawls, you know, every so often. So that one we kind of track on like a month-to-month basis.
Let's take one more of these questions and then we'll kind of do some more throughout. I think it's good to know what's on people's minds. A question came in about like optimizing design elements, right? Like how does that play into your SEO score? Are there any best practices with how modules are placed into a page?
So I think in terms of design, a lot of it is just making sure and this is going to be a little bit more technical, your images have alt tags. And again, you're only using one H1 tag per page. That's when we see a lot is people use H1 to kind of like make those big bold headers at the top of a page. And if you have multiple sections, people will put, you know, multiple H1 tags, and that design-wise will ding you negatively when it comes to SEO. So making sure you also come up with styles for your H2 and your H3, like there's multiple different tags you can use there. In terms of how your modules are placed on a page, I don't think so. It's really more the content of what the actual text you are putting within those modules that, you know, Google is searching and crawling and looking for.
Yeah, and I would say from a design perspective, because there were a few people that commented in on that, one of the things you're going to want to look at, and this goes back to Google Analytics, is just like measuring the bounce rate. I think that's where it's like having a design that's really scrollable, really mobile friendly, easy to consume and digest is going to help people engage better. Having the right clear calls to actions when people land on the site, being very clear about who you are and what you do. That's something that I think you can get a little bit of understanding on with the Google Analytics and like looking at bounce rates, how many pages people go to and hit and how long they're staying on your site or on a particular page. So those are some things that I think really lean into metrics around like the design of your site, if that's helpful. All right.
I also see, before I jump into this, there are like 3 or 4 questions about the Yoast plugin. So I do one set. Again, the Yoast plugin is great. I see, you know, a lot of that, it does the work for you. Sort of. It makes it easier for you is I think the better way to word that. Again, Yoast will ask for a default meta description when you set it up. And a lot of people will do that. And then it blanket applies that meta description to any page or template that you create on your WordPress, which as mentioned before, is extremely bad. That will ding you negatively on your site. So you want to make sure that with each blog post, each news article, each just general information page on your site, you are scrolling down to where the Yoast plugin is and updating those keywords, updating, you know, the little synopsis that will appear when someone searches for you, and making sure it includes keywords that are on that page that you want people to find when they're searching for you. And then, like I said, it will give you like a colored smiley face of where you need to be in those, and, you know, give you suggestions for improvement. So it's definitely something that it makes it a lot easier for you to just make those updates and implementations, but it's not a set it and forget it, it'll do the work for you type of tool. So definitely worth investing a little bit of time to make sure that you are editing that per page. All right, so moving back, you know, into what to measure here. So when we're thinking about this, as mentioned, you know, the site health and site audit score, you want to aim for between 75 to 90% when it comes to making those edits. Keywords, I've seen a lot of questions about this in the chat about keywords. So what we typically do when we do an in-depth keyword audit is you want to identify anywhere, you know, depending on the size of your organization, from 5 to 10 buckets of keywords that relate to your organization. And then, so that is more generic. Like, again, using the food bank example, it can be food bank, you know, it could be volunteering is your bucket. So then under that bucket, you want to come up with 10 to 20, you know, rephrases or related phrases that get at the same thing, but say it a little bit differently. So this example here, volunteering is the bucket, but the phrases are volunteering with kids or kids safe volunteering. So you kind of want to come up with 10 to 20 different versions of how you want to say volunteering. And think of this in terms of not how you talk about yourself. Everybody at their organization, you know, has their elevator pitch, knows their mission, knows what they do, and talk about themselves in a certain way. You want to think about this in the way of like a constituent, like, or a visitor. What are they searching for? So, you know, for the food bank example we've done recently, they had a lot of, you know, right now drive-through pantries, you know, with COVID are a big thing. So a lot of their site was drive-through pantries. But as a user, I'm not going to go into Google and search drive-through pantries near me. It would be food banks or food pantries, or so just making sure that you're including complete language of what you think people are searching for. Keeping in mind, some of this may be not grammatically correct. So you obviously want to keep your site, you know, grammatically correct, but it is just that small tweak of, you know, maybe adding the word food in front of bank, or adding, you know, adding the word food in front of pantries, or they didn't have anything on their site at all about volunteering with kids. And so they created an entire new blog post all about bringing your kids to volunteer at a food bank. So it's, you know, finding those holes of, you know, keywords that people are searching for that you want to be able to rank on, that you might not currently have content that matches that right now, and kind of making the two match up. Search console queries. So you want to track how people are finding you and engaging with your site content. So this goes back to the analytics. What pages are people visiting? Are those pages, you know, fully optimized for SEO? Are they keyword rich? Are they including the information that you're really wanting them to find? Is it an FAQ page because it has one very particular question on it that people keep searching for and landing on your FAQ page? If so, that probably should be a flag that maybe you should do a blog article about this, or maybe this should be a larger campaign or topic of discussion. You know, give the people what they're looking for and what they're searching for, essentially, is what it is. And this can be a struggle. Everybody thinks, you know, all different departments within organizations think their content is most important. So just making sure that, you know, within these buckets, you're covering as many departments as possible and trying to cover as much, you know, content and keywords and phrases as possible as well. And then your organic traffic. So this is the one where I said you don't have to pay a thing. You can, you know, you implement these fixes, you adjust your meta descriptions, you've changed your H1 tags, you've made your site really keyword rich. Is this number growing? You want to set a goal, whatever, you know, based on whatever your standard metrics look like, and then maybe track it on a month to month for 3 months and make sure that this is growing using these methods that, you know, we've identified above. You've done keywords, you've done your technical edits, and making sure that that number is growing, and that is helping you to know, even without SEMrush, that your site is, you know, showing higher and ranking higher in Google searches.
And Monica, real quick, could you define H1 tags? Because when you say that, I want to make sure everyone here listening knows what that means. So alt tags are like, you know, alt text for image. H1 tags are like title tags, you know, like the big headers and titles on the website. Maybe you could speak into that a little bit more.
Yeah, correct. So it stands for heading 1, and it is like an HTML code that a lot of the times is already coded on the back end of your site. If you do have like a WordPress where you're using a WYSIWYG editor, it will usually have that drop down where it will say like H1, H2, body, paragraph. It will give you those different types. And basically, Taylor, as you said, it just kind of is a style that is applied to the text that you put within that H1 tag. So a lot of the times it should be the title of your site or your page. It should be the first thing that is at the top of that. So like in this slide right here, the example of the H1 would be what to measure. That's the H1 right there. Technically, that's not actually, if this was on a website, an SEO friendly title. It should be like what to measure in my SEO, or, you know, something that is more what people search for. And then the blue words you would flag as H2 tags. So they're a little bit smaller. They're, you know, coded and styled a little bit different, but the H1 should be the title of the page, and you should only have one per page.
Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to get into that, and I actually can get kind of answer some questions that kind of come in from some people about blogging and how to be more, you know, concise. I think being specific with these title tags and thinking of the title as like the title of a blog. You know, we had some bloggers saying that they're trying to improve that. So really being specific with what the content is around in these title tags is helpful. Cool.
And yeah, and that's specifically with blogs, the H1 tag is not the place to get witty. I know as fun as you want it to be, it's really the place you want to kind of reflect what people are searching for. So we talked about a lot about this and the food bank example that I have talked about. So how do we know that these edits will actually lead to a digital transformation? So we have a slide here of our food bank client that we've been working diligently on SEO with them. So you can kind of see we did a full site audit as well as a full keyword audit for them, you know, taking a look at their prior state. They started out at that 61% site health. They had 481 easily correctable errors. A lot of this was, you know, duplicate meta descriptions because they were using Yoast and they weren't using it, you know, properly. And their average search position was about, you know, 55%. So to rectify this, what we did was we went ahead and we edited and corrected as many errors and warnings as we possibly could. Keeping in mind, you can't do all of them. They also have a Spanish version of a lot of their pages. And so this technically means they have duplicate pages with the same content, which was dinging as an error, but there's really not much. Again, like I said, you can't fix all of them. That's something we really can't make changes to because they want the content to mimic each other, just in a different language. We did an in-depth analysis of their keyword buckets and their search strength, and then we helped them strengthen and diversify those meta descriptions, their image alt tags, and then their site content. As mentioned, we saw a big hole. You know, even their competitors weren't ranking for volunteering with kids, and they were like, the food bank is one of the few things you can bring your kids to volunteer with. So like they saw that as a whole of content that they were missing. We created an entire blog post about volunteering with your kids so that it helped them rank more when people searched for that, as well as just making those smaller tweaks of, you know, they're in San Francisco and Marin, and they would just put, you know, Marin banks. And it's like just making sure that it says Marin food banks, because people aren't searching for Marin banks. They're searching for, you know, food banks in Marin or near me or things like that. So just thinking of it as what a visitor would be searching for when they go to your site. And then the outcomes here, you can see this one, again, the site help is really instantaneous. As soon as you make those edits, you can kind of refresh it and see it live. We were able to increase their site health. I think they're actually a little bit above 80% as of today, so by 19+%. We decreased their number of errors by 472, so they only have a handful of errors left remaining on their site. They're now averaging in the top 30% of search engine positions, and they are the highest among all of their competitors that we identified and are comparing them with. And then over the past 3 months that we've been working with them, you know, they've seen a 10% increase in organic traffic. So definitely there are some instant short-term wins you can see out of this, but over the long term as well, you should continue to see your metrics and traffic increase. So that is my technical spiel of things. Taylor, I'm going to pass it back to you to kind of talk through, you know, we've heard CEOs and how do you get buy-in and, you know, the long game of SEO.
That's back. Yeah, I was on mute. Yeah, and before we get into that, that was a really good question, and I think it leans into what you just said about, like, there are some quick wins. So we'll wrap it up with kind of like a discussion on SEO being a long game, but someone posed a question about, like, well, can you do some things to take advantage of particular moments in time, like an election year or something that's come up that, you know, was maybe unexpected. Monica, do you have any recommendations around that, like how to get some of those quick wins around, you know, specific things that just come up?
Yeah, so absolutely. You know, I think the quickness of them will depend a little bit upon, you know, how quick it is. Like I said, some things when it comes to keywords aren't always as instantaneous as, you know, just making technical edits to your site. But I do think there are ways, you know, making sure that whether it be an election, or I know we just recently worked on a client about census related stuff, making sure that you have very clear pages, like full pages dedicated to the election or the census or whatever that topic is that you're looking for. You have, you know, banners on your site that you're really enriching your site with this content. You're using those keywords, you know, keeping in mind, obviously it will ding you negatively if you just put election, 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 election like 1,000 times, but just finding ways to, you know, mindfully use those keywords across your entire site. Getting other people to link to you or backlink, you linking to them, you know, a lot of blogs questions here. Link up with another blog and share each other's posts and link to each other about whatever that topic might be. That will help Google see you as a more reputable website and help you rank higher as well. And then again, you know, that might be the opportunity where maybe if it is a, you know, a really important topic for you, to taking some of those keywords, finding out where you're ranking on them, and then maybe spending a little bit of budget in terms of ads for those particular keywords. I'm sure you've all seen it when you Google something. Usually the first 1 or 2 things that pop up will have the little word ad at it, and it's because those people are paying to actually, you know, for your clicks to show up as the first, you know, number 1 spot on Google when someone searches for those particular topics.
Awesome. Well, there are some other questions, and let's keep the conversation going. I mean, when we think, and some of the questions that have come in, I think are relevant to this, like sort of our, you know, what was going to be our closeout message, and we'll have it open up for Q&A. Is it really is a long game? I mean, there's 1,000 baby steps to get to the end goal, right? But I think just starting the process is one of the most important things. I think when you are looking for, you know, internal buy-in in your organization, maybe you need to convince your boss, like, to let you spend your time on this, right? Or maybe you need to convince other people on your team to invest in a tool like SEM-Rush, or doing some sort of an SEO audit. The long game is growing your site traffic, right? Growing engagement, growing online donations, and it's just so much more critical than ever before. I mean, Monica and I have been doing digital for a long time, so we've always said that it's critical, particularly now in the space that we live in that's so virtual. You know, driving the most effective traffic to your website is super, super important. I think there have been some really good questions too about how all of this kind of like fits in with some bigger picture things, like, well, what if you're doing a website redesign or a launch and things like that? Monica, do you have any tips or recommendations? Because I know that's often a topic that comes up again when people are, you know, leading to buy-in around a website redesign, a big website project, and how does SEO fit into that? What are your recommendations on looking at your SEO, how to maintain your existing SEO when doing some sort of a big project to launch, like a new website or a redesign?
Yeah, so definitely, you know, highly recommend doing an SEO audit before you do a website redesign, because this will also not you have to spend a lot of time investment into fixing those technical issues at that point. But something to keep in mind, you know, when you do launch your news site, that you're making sure pages are well laid out, well built. I saw something about subheadings in the comments. Yes, you want to make it an easily scannable, easily readable page, you know, not giant blocks of content. Use bullets, use subheadings, kind of break things out as it would naturally happen in a conversation. It will give you an idea how to lay out those pages in your redesign, as well as helping you identify what content is most important. What are people looking for? What are they visiting? What are they searching for? And that is really what you should highlight most on your site. And if you're ranking for things that aren't your mission, or you know, don't fit in your brand messaging, then that also is, you know, a red flag that maybe you need to change the way you talk about yourself and the way that you're presenting your organization and the words that you're using to talk about your mission, to make sure you are landing, you know, in that space you're intending to be.
Mm-hmm. Another question that came in that I think fits into the bigger picture that's really good is, what about other platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and, you know, hashtags, you know, videos, all these other pieces of content that fit into what's driving people to either one of those platforms or your website. Do you have recommendations around that, or how to measure that? I know there are tools out there that actually specifically measure like social engagement, but I don't actually know the answer off the top of my head. Monica, do you know, does SEMrush also digest social platforms like that and hashtags and things?
I think it does have a place you can link your social accounts to kind of track those overall just metrics. I have not myself dug into that particular one. We do some social work with our clients, but not tons of it. I do think it's just beneficial to think of your website and all of these channels as an entire digital ecosystem. You know, you're not going to just put something on your website and leave it there. A big thing is, you know, end of year. A lot of people will just think of it as an email campaign, but it shouldn't be. You should be posting on your social channels. You should be having a live box on your website. You should be sending out emails. You should have hashtags. You should be reaching out to people basically across all channels. You can, you know, utilize the Facebook pixel, so you can use retargeting ads, you know, so if they visit your site, they're seeing you within their Facebook feed, kind of like that big brother talk everyone always has. I just talked about I needed to buy X and ads for it. So just making sure that you are presenting the information that is important to you and your mission across all your channels, you know, in the best way that you can. UTM tagging all of your posts, all of your emails. That way you can track in Google specifically, where are these folks coming from? Are they clicking on a certain link or button more than another link or button? You know, just continuing to try to identify what is most important to your constituents, and that's what you should continue to present.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was like trying to mull through in my head some of the social listening platforms specifically that do really weigh in on that aspect. And so like if you go Google, I know there's one I used before, I think it's called Brand 24. Google, you know, social listening platforms or brand listening platforms. And from those, you can actually do a lot of research very specifically on hashtags and like social keywords. And you can look at trends for like your vertical, even in particular. You can see what people are searching for on social platforms. So that might be something to go do a little bit of research on and check out. I'm gonna just, I know we've got about 5 minutes left. First off, thanks everyone for joining us. I know we've got some more questions and we'll hang on as long as we can, but I did wanna share that we've got a lot of goodies for you on this sort of stuff, on the entire digital ecosystem, really. If you go to our website at fireflypartners.com, that's that screenshot that Monica mentioned earlier. We've got, if you go to our website, use the search bar and, you know, look for Google Analytics or SEO, you'll find some of our resources that all roll up into a lot of the stuff that we talked about today. And we also put out an annual nonprofit digital tools guide. We just released ours in April this year. That's not SEO related so much, but if you are looking for different, like, hey, what are the different tools in the nonprofit marketplace that are really purpose-built for organizations like mine? We do a lot of research and sort of break down on what does what. And then lastly, we do have the Nonprofit Razzle Dazzle podcast. If you're looking for something to do in these COVID times, go check out the podcast where we interview people at nonprofits to talk about the work that they're doing and different use cases and things like that. I also want to make sure everyone has our contact info. We are Taylor at fireflypartners.com and Monica at fireflypartners.com, so we keep it pretty simple. Please feel free to reach out to us. There have been a ton of amazing questions that came in, and if I've got, let's see, I'll do a time check. We might have 1 more minute to do one more question that's come in. But please feel free to reach out if you've got questions. Shoot us an email, and we're happy to hop on the phone with you, email, chat through your questions, and point you in any direction that we can. Or if you're interested in considering an SEO audit, like what Monica showed you, we've been doing with Marin County Food Bank. We're happy to dig into the work with you as well. All right, just gonna see if, looks like we had some chat going on. Can you determine whether SEO is important for your specific organization? That's a good follow-up one. We'll do one quick question to end it. Does strengthening meta descriptions, alt tag site content equal packing them with your keyword variations? I didn't know, Monica, if you had a quick answer to that. Yes, no, things to consider. Yes
and no. I think I mentioned, you want to be mindful of it when you do that. You want to use those keywords. You want to, it will give you, you will put it as your phrase, then you will put it as a sentence. Just keeping in mind, you want to keep it conversational, not just keyword after keyword after keyword. Don't make it seem too buzzwordy, but more it's hey, here's this thing that I know you're interested in and let me talk to you about it. So just trying to utilize them and maybe using it in different ways. On your alt description, you have, volunteering with kids. On your, site content, it's how to bring your kids to volunteer at a food bank. It's just using different variations of it, not using the same wording over and over again, because that will ding you negatively. So just try to keep it as conversational as possible. And then, as mentioned, keeping your pages, well outlined with headings, subheadings, and the content as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks to Netroots for hosting us today. Thanks everyone for joining. This has been great. We really appreciate all the interaction and the questions. Again, please reach out and let us know if you've got further questions. We're happy to connect and answer all of your SEO hopes and dreams.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I appreciate all the great questions.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks have a great rest of the conference too.
Yes.
The room's going to go dark in just a few minutes. So folks, if you want to figure out where you're headed next, you've got time to go do that. And thank you all very much for your time and attention today. And thank you to Taylor and Monica for a very, very good session. You got lots of great questions, and I think you got most of them answered.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.